So continuing here in Prereq 6 on factoring formulas, this is our third lesson here. So factoring is just simply expressing as a product of a reduced polynomial is all that we are talking about here.
Have you heard about the dance?
And we have here is another example. This is example 4. There's other types of factoring here to keep in mind that's not just dealing with quadratics, which is what we're getting at with this. You can also take things out that are in common in both terms. In this case, when I look at this example, I have an 8 and a 4. Well, I can take a 4 out of both of those because I can divide a 4 out of each of them. And when I do that, I take the 4 out, and I also have an x in both of these that I can take out. So I'm going to take an x out of each of those. So I take a 4x. All that I have left in the parentheses is what I have to figure out. So what do I have left? I have a 2 because 8 divided by 4 is 2. I still have 1x left over there. Okay. Over here I took an x out. I also divide up by 4, so I have a 1. I have a 1 left, no x's, and a y, so all I have left is a 1y, which happens to be a positive because there's a plus sign, positive 1y left over. And there's your factor. It's just taking out terms that are the same in both. In this one right here, I could sit here and try to slide and divide, or I could sit there and try to slide the 25 over and get a really large number and try to factor it that way. Or you could realize that the 25x squared plus a 25x minus a 150 all has something in common. They all have a 25 that I can take out of all of them. And when I do that, 25 divided by 25 is an x squared, so I have an x squared in the first term left over. 25 divided by 25 is a 1, so I have a positive x left over. And a negative 150 divided by 25 happens to be a negative 6. So now this is much simpler to factor. If I want to factor that, I sit there and say, hey, what multiplies to give you negative 6 that adds to give you a 1? Well, can you guys think of anything? Well, off the top of my head, I can, right? Negative 2 times 3 is a negative 6. And negative 2 plus 3 is 1. So a negative 2 and a positive 3. And there is this problem completely factored. So sometimes it's just more difficult to try to factor and slide things over and get incredibly large numbers. Or if you realize you can take a number out of all of them first, which in our case is a 25, it makes your life so much easier to factor these. Looking here at example 6 now, the numbers, there's nothing I can take out, right? A 4 and a 9, there's nothing in common there. But the x's, there's stuff, right? I have 3 x's here and I only have 5 here. So what I can do is I can take 3 out, but I have 2 x's left over. Then I take a look at the y's, right? So keep in mind I took 3 x's out, so that's an x cubed. Now I look at the y's. I have 1 y that I took out over here, so if I take 1 y out of there, I have 2 y's left over. So what I'm saying is I took out an x cubed, that's why that's outside. Then I took out a y, that's why that's in the outside. I still have a 4 left over, and I have 2 x's, so I have a 4x squared left over. I still have my minus 9 left over, because I didn't take any numbers out. I took all those x's out, but I still have some y's. I have 2 y's left over, so I have a negative 9 y squared left over. So this is what I have left over, and you're sitting here saying, well, what in the world is he doing? Well, here's what I'm doing. You guys got to remember the factoring formulas. And from the factoring formulas, to get you to remember here, is, can I rewrite 4 as something squared? Yep, that's a 2 squared. Can I rewrite 9 as something squared? Yep, that is a 3 squared. So actually, when I'm doing this, I end up having a 2x squared and a 3y squared. And because there's a minus sign in between them, that means I can use the difference of squares formula. So I actually have this x cubed y on the outside. And from the first product formula, I end up getting a 2x minus 3y and a 2x plus 3y because of that first factoring formula that we went over. So you gotta always keep in mind, if I want you to factor it as far as it can possibly be factored, you have to keep your head in the game and remember some of those factoring formulas. And the big one to remember out of all of those is the difference of squares. This can be squared and so can this.
Look out, I've got cat-like speed and reflexes.
So some more factoring formulas there for you. We just went over the difference of squares. That's what that one was. So we'll go over another example here. Right? This I can rewrite as 3 squared. This I can rewrite as 4 squared. I regroup this together as a 3a and a 4. Right? So this is the first term. This is the second term. So it's 3a minus 4 and 3a plus 4. That's all that I'm doing. I'm just regrouping things together. So it's 3a minus 4 and 3a plus 4, because I'm looking to see if I can square each term. Now I have the cubed one. I'm sorry to say, out of all of these formulas, the other ones are easier to remember. The cubed one here is x cubed minus y cubed. Okay, you got to remember it. That's all I can tell you. You have to remember this formula. If you do not remember the formula, you're not going to be able to factor them completely. So, since it's x cubed minus y cubed, here's the first easy thing to remember. Since it's x cubed minus y cubed, well, it's x minus y. Okay? The formula has an x squared to start it and a y squared to start it, and then you just multiply the two terms in the middle. Okay? So if this is minus, it's plus. So down here, can I rewrite 8 as something cubed? Yeah, I can, right? 2. 2 cubed is 8. Can I rewrite 64 as something cubed? Yes, I can. A 4. 4 cubed is 64. So really what I'm looking at is not something squared, which is what we were doing here. It's something cubed. This is 2 cubed. This is 4 cubed. And then I can group them together to get a 2x cubed and a 4y cubed. Those are your terms. So according to the formula, you take your first term minus your second term. That's what this is. First term minus your second term. And there we go. Then you take your first term and you square it. So 2x squared. And then you take your first term and you multiply it by your second term, which happens to be in our case a 4y. And then you take the last term and you square it. So almost done here. There's the front. I had to take that squared through to both, so 2 squared is 4, and x squared is 4x squared. 2 times 4 is 8, and the x and y can't go together, so it's just 8xy. And that squared comes through, 4 squared is 16, and y squared is y squared. And there is that factored. That wee little thing right here, 8x cubed minus 64y cubed, can be factored into that big old thing right there.
Dang.
So when we come back here, we will try to finish up on our factoring formulas in Prereq 6 on factoring in Algebra 3 Trig.